Hello and welcome to the History of Television and Cable. This is with Journalism 101, Intro to Mass Comm. My name is Kelsey Stewart and this is with Moorpark College. Television's rise throughout the 1950s has created fears that radio, as well as books, magazines, would become irrelevant and unnecessary. But both radio and print media adapted. In 1948, only 1% of American households had a TV. By 1953, more than 50% had a TV, and in 1960, more than 90% of American households had a television set. There are three major historical developments that shaped this movement. As we discussed in recent lectures, today more radio stations are operating and more books and magazines are published than ever before. But the technological innovations and patent wars, the wresting of content controls from advertisers, and the socio-cultural impact of the infamous quiz show scandals all helped to shape and develop how TV got its origins and where it is today. So just as the pioneers of radio isolated radio waves from the electromagnetic spectrum, so attempted television's earliest pioneers to separate TV waves. The prevalent thought was if a person could transmit audio signals from one place to another, why not visual images as well? This concept was toyed with for more than 100 years before it was developed. Television images could not physically float through the air, and technicians and inventors developed a method of encoding them at a transmission point, which was the TV station, and decoding them at a reception point, which was the TV set. In the 1880s, Paul Nipkow developed the scanning disc. This separated pictures into pinpoints of light that could be transmitted as a series of electronic lines. As the disc spun, each small hole scanned one line of a scene to be televised. This served as the foundation for experiments on the transmission of visual images. The story of TV's invention quickly became a battle between two independent inventors, Russia's Vladimir Zworykin and the Idaho teenager Philo Farnsworth. Vladimir Zworykin got his start in Russia working for Boris Rosing as he improved Nipkow's scanning device. In 1919, he came to America and began working for Westinghouse and then the RCA. In 1923, Zworykin invented the iconoscope, which is pictured right here to the right-hand side. The iconoscope is the first TV camera tube to convert light rays into electronic signals. So he also received a patent for this in 1928. Idaho in 1927, on September 7th, 1927, so about the same time, an Idaho teenager, Philo Farnsworth, also found out the mechanical scanning system would not picture through the air over long distance. So, on September 7th, the 21-year-old Farnsworth transmitted the first electronic TV picture. He rotated a straight line scratched on a square of painted glass by 90 degrees. RCA, the Radio Corporation of America, was also the world leader in broadcasting technology, soon got wind of the Idaho's teen's invention and challenged Farnsworth to a patent battle. Farnsworth had to rely on his high school science teacher to retrieve his original drawings from 1922. His work paid off, though, and he was awarded a patent in 1930. After the RCA's defeat, the RCA president had to negotiate to use Farnsworth's patents. Farnsworth later licensed these patents to RCA and AT&T for use in the commercial development of television. At the end of television's developmental stage, Farnsworth conducted the first public demonstration of television at the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia in 1934, 5 years before RCA's famous public demonstration at the 1939 World's Fair. So here we have setting technical standards. As the business of television elevated itself closer to a mass medium, a set of technical standards had to be set for product manufacturers. In the late 1930s, the National Television Systems Committee, or the NTSC, a group of representing major electronics firms, outlined the industry-wide manufacturing practices and compromises on technical standards. As a result, the Federal Communications Commission responded with an analog standard. This was based on radio waves that controlled all TV sets in 1941 with certain restrictions and limitations of companies. The U.S. continued to use these analog signals until 2009, when they were replaced with digital signals. So the analog signals are actually the bunny ears, which some of you might remember, and the digital signals are what we have today. So the U.S. continued to use these analog signals until 2009, when they were replaced with digital signals. The digital signals translate TV images and sounds into binary codes, ones and zeros like computers use, and allow for increased channel capacity and improved image quality and sound. HDTV or high definition television digital signals offer the highest resolution and sharpest image. So in the 1940s, the FCC began assigning channels in specific geographic areas to make sure there was no interference. Because in the early days of television, the number of TV stations a city could support was limited because airwave spectrum frequencies interfered with one another. So if a city could not have a channel 2, a city could have a channel 2 and a channel 4, but not a channel 3. There were many years, in fact, where New Jersey had no TV stations because the signals would have interfered with the New York stations. The solution then was for cable systems to send channels through cable wire that didn't interfere with each other. So in the 1940s, the FCC began assigning these channels in specific areas. But by 1948, with 100 TV licenses issued, there was growing concern about the finite number of channels and the frequency interference problems. The FCC put in a license freeze. So cities like New York, Chicago, and LA had several TV stations, while other areas like Little Rock, Arkansas, and Portland, Oregon had none. In non-TV cities, movie audiences increased. In cities with TV stations, there was a 20 to 40% drop in moviegoer attendance, nightclub attendance, as well as library book circulation and radio listeners. The freeze was lifted in 1952, and 1,300 communities received TV channel allocations. By the mid-1950s, there were more than 400 TV stations, making TV a mass medium. Color TV was introduced in the mid-1950s by RCA, but it didn't stick until 1966 when the big three networks, CBS, NBC, and ABC, all broadcasted in color. Today, there are around 2,000 TV stations in America. So, by the early 1960s, television became a dominant mass medium and culture force, with more than 90% of the U.S. households owning at least one TV set. Television began to further break apart from its radio heritage and charter its own path. Like radio in the 1930s and 1940s, early television programs were developed, produced, and supported by a single sponsor, with many of the top-rated programs in the 1950s using the sponsor's name as a title of the show, like Colgate Comedy Hour, for instance. A single sponsor, though, meant that the content was controlled and the producer had little sway. To combat that, the president of RCA, NBC, and CBS appointed Pat Weaver as the official president of NBC. Weaver, he actually increased program length from the radio, established 15 minutes to 30 minutes. This raised the program costs for advertisers and helped to discourage the solo program sponsors, allowing for less bias-controlled programming content. So program types expanded during this time. The magazine program we have here featured multiple small segments: news, talk, comedy, and music. In 1952, The Today Show was introduced by NBS as a 3-hour news talk program. Ads were offered within the shows, and advertisers paid the network for the 30 to 60 time slots. Now the network produced its own content, not the sponsors. The television spectacular was also introduced by Weaver, who bought the rights to the special Broadway productions like Peter Pan in 1955. It ran with 65 million viewers. The spots for TV spectaculars were later filled then by Nat King Cole, Frank Sinatra, Judy Garland, for example, as live performances. Quiz shows also became popular at this time when CBS aired the $64,000 question, which revived the radio quiz show genre, which was the $64 question. The program was sponsored by Revlon and ran during prime time, which is 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. It became the most popular show on TV during the first year, and Revlon's cosmetic sales went from 1.2 million to 10 million in 1959. The networks had figured out a way to gain control over the TV's content. So the quiz show scandals started with Charles Van Doren. He was a young Columbia University professor who won almost $130,000 from the hit show 21 in 1956. His fame landed him a job on the NBC's Today Show, but by 1958, the rise in quiz shows led to inquiry into rigged seasons. This led to a New York grand jury probe and a 1959 congressional investigation, which revealed that, in fact, Van Doren had admitted to cheating. So big money primetime quiz shows ended. The impact, though, of the quiz show scandal was enormous. Sponsors had originally pressured the TV executives to rig the programs, and this scandal put an end to any role that major sponsors had in creating TV content. The fraud, though, undermined the trust that Americans had put in primetime TV content. For instance, many had trusted what they saw with their own eyes more than the words that they read or heard. This was the first dramatic indication that TV could also manipulate. Our contemporary love and hate relationships with electronics also began at this time. The third factor established the cultures of America. So the fact that Doren had come from a well-off Ivy League family and cheated for fame and money drove a wedge between skeptical intellectuals and the popular new medium. In 1961, the FCC Commissioner Newton Minow, who labeled game shows, westerns, cartoons, and other popular genres as television's vast wasteland. So critics have now used this term wasteland to speak for the TV industry's failing to live up to its potential. That potential being to earn trust and truth from its viewers. The primetime quiz basically shows a brief comeback. It did come back in 1999 when ABC Who Wants to Be a Millionaire emerged as that season's #1 program. So, fast forward now, the big three, CBS, NBC, and ABC, dictated virtually every trend in programming. Collectively, their content accounted for 95% of all primetime TV viewing. This only halted in 2013 with the rise of Netflix and Amazon streaming services and the loss of the younger crowd actually watching TV. Studies predicted that in 2020, less than 20% of Americans would tune into primetime news coverage. However, that was before the stay-at-home orders, which challenged all of those studies. Poynter studies found that between March 16th and April 7th, about 31 million people watched one of the three national network evening news broadcasts. That's a 42% increase from a year ago. PBS's NewsHour is up about 34%. CNN up 168%, Fox News is up 45%, and MSNBC is up 24%. So that shows that although predicted to drop, primetime news is still being viewed by the American public. So this is a wrap-up of the history of television, just snapshots kind of where it started and really where it is right now. If you want to go further into it, here's Media, Society, and You. This gives a great chapter outline on the history of television, as well as our source, our textbook that is in the print form, sourced right here. All right, thank you for tuning in.